A father stands neck-deep in the river, making an impossible choice. To spare his children from the agony ahead, he takes their lives quickly, then his own. They sink slowly into the water in a final embrace. Around them, people are burning. Yes, burning. In the water, their hair catches fire like torches. The river is boiling. Hundreds cry out, trying to escape the flames. But the water offers no refuge. The air above the river is literally ablaze. Every breath scorches their lungs from within. Panicked cattle stampede through the crowd, trampling people beneath their hooves. By dawn, 1,500 people will be gone. An entire town will vanish from the face of the earth in 2 hours. But you've never heard of this, because that same night, another fire broke out, the one everyone knows, the Great Chicago Fire. The story of Mrs. O'Leary's cow and the overturned lantern, 300 lives lost, headlines around the world, a national tragedy, and the town where 5 times as many people perished, total obscurity, the name erased from memory. Peshtigo, a small lumber town in northern Wisconsin, 1,500 people burned alive, drowned in boiling water, suffocated in smoke. The deadliest fire in American history, and almost nobody knows its name. You're about to discover 3 things. First, how this happened, how people could burn while standing in water, how a firestorm destroyed 12 towns in a single night. Second, why the world forgot this tragedy, why 300 victims became legend while 1,500 became a footnote in history. And third, the most disturbing part, how this forgotten disaster became a blueprint for warfare in World War II, how military strategists studied Peshtigo for decades to develop tactics that would claim hundreds of thousands of lives in mere hours. 1,500 lives, 2 hours of darkness, 1 forgotten town, 3 truths that will change how you think about the justice of history. Early autumn. Peshtigo, a town of 2,000 residents. The Peshtigo Company woodenware factory where half the men earn their living. The sawmill where the other half work. A church with a new bell tower. The pride of the local priest, Father Peter Pernin. He spent 3 months' wages on that bell, polished it with his own hands. In 6 hours, that bell will become a puddle of molten metal. But Father Pernin doesn't know that yet. On Main Street stands a boarding house, a large 2-story wooden structure. 75 people call it home. Single lumberjacks from Canada, young factory workers. The Stevenson family, husband, wife, 3 children, an elderly widow, Mrs. Abernathy, who cooks breakfast for the boarders. In 6 hours, all of them will perish in this house. Their remains will fuse together so completely that it will be impossible to distinguish one person from another. But right now it's Sunday evening. Families are having supper. Children play in the street. Newlyweds, Thomas and Elizabeth Connor, married just a week ago, stroll along the riverbank hand in hand. By morning, they'll be discovered in that river, inseparable even in death. They'll pass in each other's arms. The summer had been abnormal, 5 months without rain. Farmer John Mulvey touches the trees on his property every morning. They're hot as a cast-iron stove. Bark cracks from dryness. Leaves wither and fall, though autumn has barely begun. He notices something peculiar. An old stump at the edge of his property is smoldering, smoking from within, but nobody lit it. The air is simply so hot and dry that wood begins combusting spontaneously. Children play with this phenomenon like it's a parlor trick. They find smoldering stumps, blow on them, fanning the embers. Adults laugh. Nature's quirks. Nobody understands that the entire region has become a powder keg, that hundreds of these smoldering spots are building toward critical mass, that less than a week remains until ignition. The smell of smoke has become part of daily life. It hangs in the air constantly, from smoldering stumps, from piles of sawdust near the mill, from small blazes in the forest. People stopped noticing, grew accustomed. Smoke became background noise, like birdsong or the rush of the river. Danger lost its edge because it persisted too long, and danger you grow accustomed to strikes without warning. Sunday morning, people attend church. Father Pernin celebrates Mass, delivers a sermon about patience and faith. Parishioners half listen, minds on their own concerns. After the service, they return home. An ordinary day, the last ordinary day of their lives. By evening, the sky turns an unnatural color, blood red, but thick, dense, as if someone smeared paint across the horizon. The priest steps onto the church porch and gazes at that sky. Anxiety gnaws at him. He's seen much in his lifetime, but never a sky like this, as if the air itself has changed. Heavy, wrong, the wind picks up. First a gentle, pleasant evening breeze, then it strengthens more. By 9:30, the wind is powerful enough to knock a grown man off his feet. Trees bend nearly to the ground. Burning embers begin falling from the sky. Not sparks, actual embers. Fist-sized chunks of glowing coal. They rain down, igniting grass, wooden fences, rooftops. Father Pernin watches a burning ember land on his church roof. He runs toward it with a bucket of water, but by the time he arrives, 10 more embers have fallen, then 20 more. He can't keep up. Nobody can. The air is literally filled with fire. Several miles to the north, deep in the forest, something occurs that witnesses will later describe as the birth of a living creature. Dozens of small fires begin expanding. Heat from them rises upward, creating powerful updrafts. These currents pull air from all directions. Oxygen rushes toward the flames. Wind spirals inward. A vortex forms, a fire tornado. The temperature inside this vortex soars to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. At such temperatures, iron melts like wax, stones crack, sand transforms into glass, and the air itself becomes flame. Literally, the temperature is so extreme that oxygen in the air ignites. This fire tornado moves at 90 miles per hour, faster than a horse can gallop, faster than a person can run. It produces a roar. Witnesses describe it as the sound of 1,000 locomotives at full throttle. The ground trembles from this roar. People a mile from the flames feel themselves being pulled inward. Wind so powerful that grown men cannot stay on their feet. It knocks them down, drags them toward the inferno. Trees are torn from their roots and hurled into the fire like matchsticks. Century-old pines that survived countless storms lift into the air and disappear into the fiery vortex. Entire buildings rise from their foundations. The sawmill, a massive wooden structure, breaks apart, and those pieces rocket skyward. 9:30 in the evening. In Chicago, 250 miles south, a barn catches fire. One cow, one overturned lantern, a small blaze that could be doused with a bucket of water. But wind fans it. The fire spreads to the neighboring house, then the next. Within an hour, a city block is ablaze. The Chicago fire begins. 300 people will perish over 3 days. The entire world will learn of this fire. The legend of Mrs. O'Leary's cow will enter textbooks. And in Peshtigo, at that very moment, the fire tornado descends upon the town. 2,000-degree temperatures, 90-mile-per-hour winds, a deafening roar. 1,500 people will perish in 2 hours. But almost nobody will learn of it, because Chicago has telegraph lines, has journalists, has wealthy residents whose stories people want to hear. Peshtigo has none of these. The boarding house on Main Street, 75 people inside, some already asleep, others reading by candlelight. The Stevenson family tucking in their children. Mrs. Abernathy washing dishes after supper. Suddenly the windows begin heating up. Glass becomes hot to the touch. Someone touches the frame, jerks their hand back with a cry. The wood burns like a hot skillet. A second later the windows explode. The glass doesn't simply shatter, it explodes from unbearable heat. Shards fly in all directions, and through the openings fire rushes in. Flames fill the hallway in an instant. Temperature inside the house rockets to several hundred degrees within seconds. People leap up, cry out, run for the exit. They crowd the door, but the door is jammed. Superheated air has warped the wooden frame. It's swollen, twisted. The door won't open. Dozens of hands push it, try to break it down, but in vain. Smoke fills their lungs. Heat sears their skin. Children cry, clinging to their parents. Someone tries to break through windows to escape outside. But where windows once were, now there's only fire. A solid wall of flame. No way out. Absolutely no escape. 75 people are trapped in a wooden house transforming into a furnace. The screaming lasts 3 minutes, then falls silent. By dawn, where the boarding house once stood, they'll find 75 charred remains, fused together. Mothers who shielded their children with their bodies. Men who tried to break through walls with bare hands. All gone, all perished in the flames, and impossible to distinguish one person from another. A carbon shell joined them forever. Father Pernin watches his church burn. Flames consume the building in a minute. The bell tower ignites like a match. 3 months' wages, the pride of his entire life, burning. The priest grabs the sacred tabernacle, the church's holiest relic, stuffs his pockets with scrolls, as much as he can carry. Nothing else can be saved. He runs toward the river. Fire surrounds him on all sides. The ground beneath his feet is so hot his shoes begin smoldering. Air scorches his throat with every breath. Trees around him transform into torches in seconds. But the priest keeps running, prays while running, clutches the tabernacle so tightly his knuckles turn white. Hundreds rush toward the Peshtigo River. Their only hope, water. It must protect them from fire. Simple logic. Fire cannot burn in water. Men scoop up children. Women lift their skirts and run with all their strength. Elderly folks, barely mobile, hobble behind. Everyone streams toward the river. They plunge into the water. Hundreds of people simultaneously, submerged to their necks, to their heads. They think, We're saved. The water is cool, soothing. They stand in the river, watching their town burn. See flames devouring houses. Hear explosions, kerosene barrels detonating at the factory. But they're in water. They're safe. Then the impossible happens. The air above the river begins to burn. The fire is so intense that air temperature exceeds the ignition point. People's hair catches fire even while they stand in water. A woman runs from the forest, her head blazing like a torch. She screams in agony, not understanding what's happening, leaps into the river. Her hair continues burning underwater for several seconds before finally extinguishing. People duck their heads underwater, trying to hide from the heat, but they must surface to breathe. Every breath is torture. Air burns their lungs from the inside. Almost no oxygen remains. The fire has consumed it. People suffocate while standing neck deep in water. They're neither burning nor drowning. They're slowly dying from asphyxiation and internal burns. The water around them begins heating up. First it warms, then turns hot, then begins to boil. Yes, literally boil. The air temperature above the river is so extreme that the water reaches boiling point. The water around them begins heating up. First it warms, then turns hot, then reaches boiling point. People stand neck deep in scalding water with no way out. The banks are walls of solid flame. There's no escape. Their skin blisters. Some submerge deeper, trying to hide from the heat. They suffocate underwater. Others stay at the surface, slowly overcome by the extreme temperatures. From the burning forest, panicked cattle stampede forward. Hundreds of animals, blinded by smoke and terror, they see water and run toward it, not seeing the path, not seeing the people, just blind animal panic. The cattle charge into the river, and their hooves come down on people's heads. A woman tries to shield her child. Both are trampled. A man raises his arms, trying to stop an animal. A hoof strikes his skull. The river becomes chaos. People drown beneath the weight of animals. Escaping fire, they perish from hooves instead. The water darkens. Bodies, human and animal, float together. Human cries mix with the bellowing of cattle. The roar of the fire drowns out everything. Hell on earth takes a form the human mind cannot comprehend. One man stands chest deep in water, holding 3 children. His name is Thomas Wilson, a farmer, 38 years old. 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, 7, 5, and 3 years old. His wife has already passed, overcome by smoke as they ran toward the river. He's alone, with 3 children, in scalding water. Everything around them burns. The children cry. Their skin blisters from the heat. The youngest screams in pain. The water is too hot. Thomas pulls the children close, tries to shield them with his body, but there's no protection. The fire doesn't subside. The water doesn't cool. People around them perish one after another. Some drown, others suffocate. Still others simply stop moving. Their hearts give out. Thomas understands there's no escape. The fire will burn for hours more. The children won't survive that long. They'll suffer, die slowly in agony. He looks at their faces, at their tears, at their burns, and he makes a decision no father should ever have to make. He takes a knife from his pocket, a hunting knife, sharp. He pulls his oldest son close. The boy doesn't understand what's happening. Thomas whispers in his ear, "Forgive me," and he ends the boy's suffering quickly, in one motion, before fear can set in. The body goes limp. The middle son sees this, begins screaming, tries to pull away. Thomas holds him firmly. He's crying too, sobbing. He acts again. The second son falls silent. The daughter remains, 3 years old. She understands nothing, just cries, calling for Mama. Thomas kisses her forehead, whispers, "You'll see Mama soon," and he takes her life, last. Then he looks at the knife in his hand, at 3 children who will suffer no more, at the boiling water around him, at the fire that shows no sign of stopping, and he draws the blade across his own neck, deep, all the way. The Wilson family slowly sinks into the water, embracing 4 bodies. The father holds his children close even in death. By dawn, they'll be found exactly that way, embracing, 3 feet from shore. The water will have cooled by then. The fire will have moved on. But for the Wilson family, it will be too late. The priest will later bury them in one grave, together, because separating them would be unthinkable. Newlyweds Thomas and Elizabeth Connor are also in the river. Married 1 week. She's 19, he's 21. They hold hands. The water sears their skin, but they don't let go of each other. Elizabeth loses consciousness from the heat. Thomas catches her, doesn't let her slip underwater, holds her, kisses her, whispers, "I love you." She doesn't hear. She's already gone. Thomas continues holding her, stands in the water with his deceased wife in his arms. Fire all around, people perishing, but he stands, simply stands, because to let go would mean accepting that she's gone, and he cannot do that. Not even when he himself begins losing consciousness from burns and asphyxiation. Not even when he knows he's dying. By morning they'll be found together, charred remains impossible to separate, their skin fused from the heat, wedding rings melted into strange droplets. They'll be buried together, in one grave, with no names on the marker, just two bodies among hundreds of unidentified. Father Pernin survives. He stands in the river, holding the tabernacle above his head. Water reaches his chin. He submerges his face when the air becomes too hot, surfaces, takes a breath, submerges again, for hours. Around him people perish. He hears their cries, prays, continues holding the sacred vessel above water. The church scrolls in his pockets are soaked, ink running, but the tabernacle stays dry. By midnight the fire has passed completely through Peshtigo. The town no longer exists, every building reduced to ash, streets vanished. Only smoldering ruins and bodies remain. 800 people gone in the town center, but the fire doesn't stop. It moves onward. The town of Guntown, several miles north, population 300. The firestorm covers it in 20 minutes. By dawn, only ashes remain of Guntown. 270 people perished, 30 survive. They hid in a well, submerged to their necks in water. They heard their town burning above, heard neighbors' screams, could do nothing to help. Baldwin, 400 residents, erased from existence. Williamsonville, 200 people, vanished completely. The fire moves through forests, consuming villages and farms. 12 settlements destroyed in one night. A charred strip of earth, 10 miles wide, 40 miles long, 1,200,000 acres of forest, transformed into black wasteland, an area larger than all of London. The total death toll exceeds 1,500, but nobody knows the exact number. Many bodies burned completely, turned to ash. Entire families vanished, with nobody left to search for them, nobody to identify them, nobody to bury them. Dawn comes slowly. The sun rises over smoldering ruins. Father Pernin emerges from the river. His legs barely support him. His clothing is charred, skin covered in blisters. But he's alive, the tabernacle intact. He looks at where his church once stood. There lies a puddle of molten metal. The bell, 3 months' wages, transformed into a shapeless mass. But there's something strange. 2 feet from that puddle stands a wooden bench, the very one where the priest loved to sit after services. It's untouched by fire. Even the paint hasn't peeled, as if the fire went around it. Chose melted metal but spared wood. Father Pernin stares at that bench and doesn't understand. The fire behaved unpredictably, as if it possessed intelligence. Survivors emerge from the river, fewer than 100 from Peshtigo's 2,000 residents. Many are unclothed, their garments burned away, skin covered in burns, hair singed, faces black with soot, eyes red from smoke. They wander through ruins in shock, try to find their homes, but can't determine where they stood. Everything transformed into identical ash. No landmarks remain. The town has vanished. The search begins. People turn over charred remains, try to identify loved ones, but most bodies are burned beyond recognition. Black, shriveled, faceless, impossible to determine age, gender, names. They find wedding rings, buttons, scraps of clothing, try to identify by these, but many don't even have that. A woman finds a small body, the size of a 3-year-old child. She has a 3-year-old daughter. She lifts this body, holds it to her chest, rocks it, sings a lullaby, weeps. Other women approach. They cry too. Each has lost someone, husband, child, parents, and each hopes this isn't their loved one, but understands it's someone's. They find an infant, alive. He lies on a woman's chest. The woman has perished. Her back is charred, her arms frozen in a protective gesture. She covered the baby with her body, took the fire upon herself. The infant cries against her body, hungry, frightened. A woman takes him. Nobody knows whose he is. His mother, one of hundreds unidentified. They'll name the infant Peter, after Father Pernin. He'll grow up never knowing his parents, not even knowing his true name. Bodies are buried quickly. Too many, too hot. Decomposition begins despite it being October. Heat from smoldering embers accelerates the process. They dig a mass grave in the center of what was Peshtigo, a pit 30 feet long, 20 wide, 10 deep. Bodies are placed inside, carefully, with prayer. But there are so many they must simply be laid. 800 people in one pit. Father Pernin reads a brief service. His voice breaks. He's burying his flock, people he lived among for 10 years, baptized their children, married young couples, now burying them all together in one enormous grave, most without names. Families buried together, but nobody knows who lies where. The grave is covered with earth. They erect a simple wooden cross, carve a number, 800, no names. They're unknown. 350 were identified. The remaining 450 will remain nameless forever. Unknown victims of a forgotten catastrophe. In surrounding towns, they also dig mass graves. In Guntown, 270 bodies. In Baldwin, 300. In Williamsonville, 150. 1,500 total perished. Perhaps more. Nobody knows the exact count. Many bodies were never found. They simply vanished, burned completely, scattered as ash on the wind. Aid arrives from neighboring towns. People bring bread, blankets, simple clothing. They organize a commissary, distribute supplies freely, collect money. A neighboring community donates $85, an enormous sum for a small town. Farmers bring sacks of potatoes, flour, salted meat. A doctor from a town 50 miles away arrives to treat the burned, works around the clock. Many cannot be saved. The burns are too severe. Survivors remain among the ruins. There's nowhere to go. Many lost all their family. Homes burned. No work. The factory destroyed, the sawmill turned to ash. Winter approaches, and people have no shelter, no warm clothing, no food stores. They build temporary shelters, find charred boards still usable, hammer together shacks, cover them with canvas, heat iron stoves found in the ruins. Dozens of such refugees spring up amid the ashes. A small ghost town atop the bones of a dead town. News of the catastrophe reaches larger cities. Telegraphs crackle. Newspapers print emergency editions. But all the headlines are about one thing: the Chicago Fire. The Great Chicago Fire. 300 lives lost, hundreds of buildings destroyed. The legend of Mrs. O'Leary's cow that kicked over a lantern and created a national tragedy. Newspapers publish massive headlines, draw cartoons featuring the cow, interview survivors, describe heroic rescue stories. Chicago becomes a symbol, a national tragedy. Money flows from across the country, millions of dollars. The finest architects arrive to rebuild the city. Within 2 years, Chicago will rise from the ashes more beautiful and prosperous than before. And about Peshtigo, they write a small note. On page 3, in small type. The same day, a town in northern Wisconsin was affected. More people perished, but they're lumberjacks. No details available. Telegraph lines burned. Journalists cannot reach it. Roads blocked. No photographers. Nobody there, only ash and the deceased. The people of Peshtigo understand. No help is coming. $85 from neighbors, a few sacks of provisions. That's all. The world is focused on Chicago. Fewer people died there, but it has influential citizens, wealthy industrialists, politicians. Their stories matter. Their tragedy deserves attention. But the lumberjacks of Peshtigo, who cares about them? Many decide to leave. They return to Canada, where they originally came from seeking work. They gather their meager belongings, say goodbye at the graves of loved ones, walk north on foot because the horses burned and there's no money for a wagon. Some don't make it. They succumb to their injuries along the way. Winter comes early that year, but others stay. The most stubborn ones, those with nowhere else to go. Farmer John Mulvey, who lost his wife and 4 children. He stays, clears the ash where his farm once stood, begins building a new house, alone, with his bare hands, works from dawn to dusk, in silence. Neighbors come to help, also in silence. Words are meaningless after something like this. In spring, they begin rebuilding the sawmill, pool their money. Each gives what they can, someone 5 cents, someone $1. They buy saws, hammers, nails, cut timber in the surviving sections of forest. Work for almost nothing. They need to revive some kind of economy. Within a year, the sawmill operates again, slowly, with interruptions, but it operates. The town rebuilds, but it's different now. Houses are built with spaces between them, in case of another fire. Streets are made wider, fewer trees planted. Fear of fire has seeped into their bones. Population grows slowly. Instead of 2,000, now 500, then 700. After 10 years, 1,000. Peshtigo lives, but the scar remains forever. The mass grave in the town center, a constant reminder. They erect a modest memorial, a stone obelisk, carve the names. Those 350 they managed to identify. The remaining 450 are listed as unidentified. Every year on October 8th, a memorial service is held. Descendants of survivors attend, lay flowers, stand in silence. Chicago rebuilds within 2 years, becomes more beautiful, more modern, more prosperous. Architect Daniel Burnham designs new buildings, wide boulevards, parks. Chicago transforms into the jewel of the Midwest. The story of Mrs. O'Leary's cow becomes legend. Children learn it in schools. Documentary films are made. Books are written. And Peshtigo fades from memory. Even in Wisconsin, few remember this story. 1,500 perished. The deadliest fire in American history. But if you ask the average American, they've never heard the name. Everyone knows Chicago. 300 victims became a national symbol. 1,500 turned to dust in the pages of history. Years pass. Decades. Father Pernin grows old, continues serving in the rebuilt church. New bell tower, new bell. But every day the priest thinks about the old one, the one that melted into a puddle of metal, about the 75 people in the boarding house, about the Wilson family in the river, about the infant on his mother's chest. He writes his memoirs, describes that night in detail. Every detail. His book is published in a small print run, read mostly by locals. The rest of the world isn't interested. The children who survived grow up with these memories. The boy who hid in the well in Guntown fears enclosed spaces for the rest of his life, wakes from nightmares, sees fire, hears screams. His grandchildren learn the story in fragments. Grandpa doesn't like talking about it, too painful, but sometimes late in the evening he tells them how they sat in the well, how they heard the town burning above, how they couldn't help their neighbors. The infant found on his mother's chest grows up. His name is Peter. He becomes a teacher, marries, raises children, spends his entire life trying to find information about his real parents. But the record's burned. Nobody remembers. He knows only one thing. His mother died saving him, covered him with her body, took the fire upon herself. He visits the mass grave every week, doesn't know where she lies, but he comes, brings flowers, talks to her, thanks her. Early 20th century. American military officials begin studying the disaster. They're interested in one question: how did this happen? How did fire claim so many lives so quickly? Military meteorologists analyze the weather conditions of that day, study witness testimony, read Father Pernin's memoirs, map the fire's spread, calculate temperatures, measure wind speeds. They understand it was a perfect storm, drought plus strong winds plus abundant fuel plus simultaneous ignition at dozens of points. All factors aligned created a phenomenon called a firestorm, when separate fires merge into one, creating their own weather system, updrafts, hurricane-force winds, temperatures capable of melting metal. And the military has an idea, a dark idea. What if such conditions could be recreated artificially? What if thousands of incendiary bombs were dropped on a city simultaneously, create dozens of ignition points, wait for them to merge, turn an entire city into Peshtigo, but deliberately, intentionally? The concept is developed in the 1930s, tested at proving grounds in the Nevada desert. They build city mock-ups, German houses, narrow streets, wooden beams, Japanese houses, paper walls, thatched roofs. They bomb them with incendiaries, study how fire spreads, how to create conditions for a firestorm, how many bombs are needed, where to drop them, how to maximize casualties with minimum ordnance. Military strategists call it the Peshtigo effect, creating an artificial firestorm. The tragedy of a forgotten town becomes an instruction manual. 1,500 accidental victims become a template for warfare on a massive scale. World War II provides the opportunity to apply theory to practice. July 1943, Hamburg, Germany. British and American bombers drop thousands of incendiary bombs on residential districts, create multiple ignition points. Heat rises upward, pulls oxygen from all directions. A fire tornado forms, just like Peshtigo 72 years earlier. Temperature in central Hamburg reaches 800 degrees. Asphalt melts. People run through streets and their feet stick to the molten pavement. They fall, cannot rise, perish right there on the roadway. Others hide in basements, thinking they're safe. They're wrong. The fire consumes all oxygen. They suffocate in their shelters, not from flames, from asphyxiation. In one night, 42,000 people perish, more than all the air raids on London throughout the entire war. The operation receives the codename Gomorrah, the biblical city destroyed by fire from heaven. Military planners are satisfied with the results. The Peshtigo effect works. February 1945, Dresden, Germany, a city filled with refugees from the east, bombed in 2 waves. The first wave creates fires. People run into the streets. Firefighters begin battling the blazes. Rescue workers pull injured from rubble. 3 hours later, the second wave arrives, catches everyone who came outside. The firestorm consumes the city center within an hour. 25,000 people perish, perhaps more. Nobody knows the exact number. The city was full of unregistered refugees. Bodies are found for months, many impossible to identify, buried in mass graves, thousands in one pit, just like Peshtigo. March 1945, Tokyo, Japan, night of the 9th to the 10th. 334 B-29 bombers, 2,000 tons of incendiary bombs. The city is built of wood and paper, perfect fuel for a firestorm. The plan was developed based on Peshtigo studies, every detail calculated. Bombs fall around the perimeter, creating a ring of fire. People in the center are surrounded. No escape. Fire begins contracting toward the center. Temperature soars above 1,000 degrees. A fire tornado forms with such force that wind tears tiles from roofs a kilometer from the epicenter. Wooden houses explode from heat before the flames even reach them. People run to the canals, jump in the water, Just like Peshtigo, residents jumped in the river and die there the same way. Water boils, air above the canals burns, hair catches fire, lungs sear with every breath. Some submerge and never resurface. Choose drowning over burning. In 6 hours, 100,000 people perish, more than Hiroshima 5 months later, more than Nagasaki, the deadliest air raid in human history, and at its foundation lie principles studied from a forgotten town in Wisconsin. 1,500 accidental victims taught the military how to eliminate hundreds of thousands deliberately. Today, Peshtigo has 3,500 residents, more than before the fire. The town has recovered. People work, raise children, live ordinary lives, but the scar remains. A mass burial in the town center, 800 bodies beneath a simple stone monument. Next to it stands the fire museum, 2 rooms in an old building, photographs of ruins, charred artifacts in glass cases, the melted bell, deformed silverware, a charred beam fragment from the boarding house, lists of casualties on the walls, 350 names, the remaining 450, just numbers. The museum curator is an elderly man named Robert. His great-grandfather survived the fire, hid in a well in Guntown. Robert tells stories to visiting tourists. There aren't many. Peshtigo isn't on popular routes, difficult to reach, no fame. Most visitors are random travelers who saw a highway sign and turned off out of curiosity. Every year on October 8th, Robert organizes a memorial service, invites descendants of survivors. About 20 people attend, rarely more. They stand at the mass grave, read names from the monument, observe a minute of silence, lay flowers, depart, a quiet ceremony for the few. The world is occupied with other things. That same day in Chicago, major events take place. Mayoral speeches, historical reenactments, documentary films in theaters, the Great Chicago Fire, 300 victims. A national tragedy, symbol of resilience. Thousands visit the monuments. Schoolchildren write essays. Journalists interview historians. The 1,500 victims of Peshtigo stand aside, forgotten. Their story doesn't fit the convenient narrative. Too horrifying, too senseless, too unjust, easier to ignore, easier to forget. But the question remains, why does history choose some victims and ignore others? Why are 300 lives more important than 1,500? The answer is simple and harsh. Chicago had a voice, telegraphs worked, journalists arrived, wealthy residents told their stories, the world listened and remembered. Peshtigo had no voice, telegraph lines burned, roads were blocked, journalists didn't reach it, and when they did, it was already too late. Chicago occupied all the headlines. For a small lumber town, there was no space left. History made its choice, unjust, but final. Right now, while you're watching this, people are dying somewhere in the world. Thousands, from war, famine, disasters. In a year, most of you will forget their names, or never learn them, because they have no voice. Like Peshtigo, history repeats itself, again and again. We remember those we're reminded of. We forget those who cannot cry out loud enough. Do one thing. Open the comments right now and write one name from this story. Father Peter Pernin, Thomas Wilson, the 75 people from the boarding house, Thomas and Elizabeth Connor, baby Peter, any name. Because when you write it, these people stop being just a statistic, a footnote in history. They become people again, people with names, with stories, with lives that mattered. 1,500 people burned alive in Peshtigo on October 8, 1871, the deadliest fire in American history. The entire world learned about Chicago, where 5 times fewer people died. Now you know the truth. You know their story, the story of a town that history chose to forget. People who deserve to be remembered as much as any other victims. Don't let them vanish again. Tell someone, write a name, share this video, because every life matters. Every death deserves to be remembered, even if the world decided otherwise, especially if the world decided otherwise. October 8th, Peshtigo, 1,500 lost. Now you know, and that changes everything.